meeting to order. Tonight is on public safety, and first up is the police department. Chief, how you doing tonight?
Good, how are you?
Deputy Chief, how you doing?
Welcome to our home.
Well, thank you.
Should we start with your budget?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll just give, I guess, a brief overview on some of, I mean, you have all the information there. Any questions you have, certainly you can ask, but just to kind of circle back from where we were probably about a year ago, just prior to Chief Pagonis leaving, he had, on the heels of his staffing study, we had asked for 4 people. When we first met with you, we wanted to keep that 4 people, but we adjusted it slightly. We felt as if our supervision was a little lacking. So before we go growing the department, we have to probably at the same time increase some of our supervision. So we were then asking for 2 patrolmen and 2 supervisors. So that's where we are at this point with staffing, or trying to get up to staff.
Okay.
And again, in discussing this with the town manager, he felt that a phased-in approach would be appropriate. So it's always good to get the people up front, but in this particular case, we would do 2 this July, and then hopefully if things go well and we get approved, we would do the 2 the following July.
And what's the timeline to getting them on board?
That's what's difficult. So if we, obviously promoting the sergeant is a little faster, but then on the back end, hiring the patrol staff would take probably, well, at least 6 months, from start to finish. So we wouldn't actually see the full complement of 4 ready to go probably to mid-2022.
Okay.
If we did the phased-in approach.
Any questions?
I do. Chief, we talked about retirements in the force. How many do you think potential retirees do you have in the next couple of years coming up?
This is just a guess. No one has come forward,
Right.
but they're probably, in the next probably 2 years, we could be looking at 2, maybe 4.
And on your personnel services, most of that's contractual, except for the addition of the 2?
Correct.
And miscellaneous contractual? You've taken a jump on training and conference?
Right, that's in anticipation of
For
the
two
new
hun-
hires.
Okay.
And the part-time addition?
That is the, so our mental health coordinator, Samantha, would be getting a part-time recovery coach. So that's the addition for that.
Just to jump in there if I could, Mr. Chair, so the recovery coach has been with us now a couple of years, if I recall, and it was funded through a grant which is due to expire in August of this year, and so the plan would be to pick up the cost of that 16-hour-a-week recovery coach is about a little over $17,000.
Okay, thank you.
There's no other grants out there for that?
Not that we're aware of at this point.
And furnishings and equipment, what's that going to consist of?
So the, let me just make sure I got the right line.
Very last line?
Yeah.
27,750?
Right, so that's one of the things that, reason that jumped is we're due to replace our defibrillators.
Okay.
They're coming to their end of life, and as far as the warranty is concerned, so probably sometime this fall we would have to get all 13. I'm sorry, all defibrillators would be about $13,000
Okay. And
to
they're
replace them all.
one in each Mark Cruiser?
Yeah, we have at
And-
least one in each. Every officer has to sign one out when they start their shift.
Okay.
You jump in overtime.
Yeah.
Right. So that, obviously our issue with overtime has been the lack of staff, the retirements. We were down about 7 people. We had an officer deployed overseas. We've had 2 long-term injuries. obviously the chief, the deputy leaving, Officer Shalafo, Officer Bossy, so, you know, obviously that affects our ability to staff and to keep staff, so that overtime jumps. I think starting to get out of the woods, we've kind of caught up. We have 2 people in the academy right now. Our staffing levels are getting better, but just to be safe, that's, I think, a fair estimate of probably what we're looking at to get us through the next fiscal year.
The 2 long-term ones, how long has that been?
We've had one officer out since August of 2018.
Okay.
And
And the prospects of returning?
we're told that his therapy is going well and that, you know, there is prognosis that he can return. Hasn't happened yet, but
On a full-time basis or limited ability or?
well, he hasn't been cleared to come back in
No,
any
when he does,
capacity right now.
when he does come back, would it be limited or full-time?
Well, we don't have any light duty, so
Okay.
he would have to come back in his full capacity.
Okay. And the other one?
He's been out since October, and we're knock on wood, we're expecting him back probably beginning of March.
Okay, great. That's good then.
So to that point, if I could just add that the expectation is at the town meeting coming up, we will be looking for transfers to cover overtime in this fiscal year associated with the police, just because of the vacancies.
What's the expected amount for the transfer?
Brian, do we have an estimate? It's,
Obviously, the amount varies week to week.
Yeah.
At this rate, I believe it'd be about 800,000 for the total, so that would be, I think, about 175 or so in excess of the budget, assuming a lot of factors keep up, and again,
Yeah, it's still a couple months away.
exactly, they're not, they haven't exceeded anything yet.
Okay.
It's, the number of changes greatly week to week of what they're expending, so it's tough to kind of put your thumb on it.
Okay, great, thank you. Chief, you've got new people coming in.
Right.
We have new firefighters coming in.
Correct.
Your physical plant, how's that doing? The building is what, 20 years old now?
Yes, correct.
Are you busting at the seams or?
Probably, you know, one of the things we're looking to now is if we have enough locker room space or
Okay.
enough, you know, lockers in general. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. You know, we've been here since, I think, September of '01, so, you know, certainly it's been a while. You know, something to think about. You know, issues of storage and things like that are being a concern. We're okay right now, but again, looking for the future is probably, we're gonna have to make some adjustments somewhere.
Thank you. Any questions for the chief or deputy on the budget itself?
Can you talk about the capital?
Can we go to capital then, chief,
Yeah.
please? That is page
81.
81.
Page 81.
Let's put it somewhere.
No, sorry about that.
God,
Yeah, you don't have one.
yeah, we do, it isn't here someplace.
Sorry. No. No capital expenses. Oh, here we go, 73.
No, so there's, go ahead.
So you
You've got a-
want 4 new cruises this year, correct?
Right, we're reducing it from 5 to 4.
And these are going to be marked cruises?
Only one of them, I'm sorry, 2 of them will be marked. The other 2 are gonna be unmarked.
Okay.
And which ones are these replacing? Which cruises right now are we replacing?
So, the what we're finding is the current cruisers now, that the mileage just isn't that high. So the reason why we're doing it this way is to reduce the, just to deal with the cars that have the higher mileage. So that's why, I don't know what specific cruiser numbers. Dan, do you know which ones are the highest ones?
We go closer to when we, get the cars.
Okay.
I don't have the specific, cruiser, but it would be the ones with the higher mileage, obviously, we take off the road.
Where are the other two?
So the replacement dates in the vehicle books aren't accurate to what you wanna replace?
I'm sorry, I don't have that thing. So whereabouts you looking?
Police vehicles, page 13, 12 to 13.
Okay, see it now. So I'm sorry, if you could repeat the question again?
So in this booklet, it
Yeah.
says replacement date. It gives us the replacement date of the vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So I see two here that are up for this fiscal year. Are these the two that you currently want to replace?
Let's double check.
It would be, two March cruisers, whichever ones have the highest mileage. It could vary, we just had a car that was involved in a crash, we had a body shop for a few months, so obviously no miles were added onto that vehicle. So it would be determined probably a couple months before we get the car what's gonna be swapped out, and then they'll be, handed off to another town department, and obviously they'll continue using it. So I don't know if that's
So
the date.
in other words, this book's not accurate, what you're
Yeah,
replacing.
as far as the police department, all the cars go to other town departments. So as far as the police department goes, we'll kind of see where we're at that point, what needs to be replaced, and then go from there.
How big- how
I would
big-
just say that this is a rough estimate, that the book is completed at the end of December by the DPW. It's my understanding there's certainly some consultation with each of the departments, but the mileage numbers are all reflective of mileage as of the end of the calendar year, and the approximate date of replacement.
How bad was the crash for it to be in the auto body shop for a couple of months?
Side swipe. It wasn't total, but replace a fender, door, paint.
That shouldn't take a couple of months to have that repaired.
And on the form, 26 is one of the cars that's slated, so that particular
Okay.
cruiser is accurate.
And the other
Which-
two, the
which
Enmark?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mary, go.
P26.
Mary Ann, go ahead.
P26 is,
Yeah.
okay. We don't know which one, the other one. We don't know which other cruises. being
Not
replaced.
specifically, no. Again, it would
What
depend
is
on the
the
mileage.
Ford van that is due to be replaced? 2012. That's the one above it, chief.
Yeah,
We no longer have a van.
yeah.
So this book isn't
Yeah,
accurate,
that's-
okay.
I took that up, the reason why we're getting the two Ford Edge, cars for detectives, it's a smaller SUV. Right now, we're down 3, nondescript detective cars. We have the,
Why are we down 3?
just ran them into the ground. The van was no longer safe to drive.
And that's this one here? The one that was taken out of service?
Is this fan, is this the utility truck that we use?
No, that one's longer, we had the Honda Odyssey, that's now down to
So-
DPW.
So then, what we're seeing here is not correct information, if that one's
Right.
long gone.
It's different from what I have, yeah.
Yeah, we really need to get an updated,
Yeah,
That we
quite
have this
frankly,
happen
I'm
last
surprised
year,
that this
too.
is not, there isn't the communication that we should be having between the Department of Public Works. And Public Works puts this book together, it's my understanding and quite frankly expectation that Public Works is having conversations with each of the departments about what vehicles we own, what vehicles we don't own, but we'll certainly have to look.
There is software out there where we can put a barcode on each vehicle, and when it gets to DPW for either service or whatever, it can be recorded. You have a perfect maintenance history of it, and you know what car you have and what car you don't have.
I think the confusion is that the Windstar, the Ford, is actually the old animal control van, which was reused by the DPW for the hydrant painting crew.
Okay, so it shouldn't even be in your section then.
Correct. So
Right.
that's been used by the DPW.
So we are getting incorrect information.
And this
That's
happened
correct.
last year too.
Yeah.
This was an ongoing
Because,
issue
in, I
last
believe it
year.
was 2 years ago, the book showed you had marked cruisers with, and then the plates were incorrectly attached to, in the book, the vehicles that were in the book. Okay?
It's hard for us as a finance committee to sit up here and approve 4 or 5 vehicles when we don't even know what we have in our inventory.
The other thing too is the 2 that are unmarked, they're going to the detectives. Why can't they take 2 of the vehicles on the first line and reuse those?
We could, and that's what we've done in the past, but for surveillance and kind of being nondescript, obviously it's gonna look like a police car,
Okay?
a recycled cruiser, and then there's an expense of stripping the car down with the lights, taking everything off, sometimes painting it. Where if we bought them brand new, and outfitted them right from the beginning, all the lights could be hidden, essentially at the factory. We would keep a car for probably in excess of 10 years.
So then I can take away from this conversation is that we really don't need 4 or 5 new cruises each year.
Going forward,
We
I
could
don't-
probably
I
do
don't
it
think
every
after
other year,
this
whatever.
or a year from now, we're gonna be in really good shape as far as
Okay.
cruises.
Okay.
The K-9 car, is that still in service?
That's new.
Yeah, is it?
We
it says
use
K9.
it on occasion.
So why can't we, take K-9 off of it and put it into the rotation?
We are in the process of doing that.
How long of a process is it?
I'm actually meeting with Kenny tomorrow at the DPW. We have to take the dog kennel out of it and either put the seat back in or a prison cage. Yeah,
And that has pretty low mileage. Can we get
Yeah.
away with using this cruiser instead of buying a new one this year?
We could.
Once we,
And, just to circle back with the Ford, this year, the Edges are obviously a cheaper car, they're
Yeah.
not as expensive as the Explorers, and we would keep them longer. Part of the issue we were having with the unmarked cars is the maintenance, because we would use old cars, sometimes a drug seizure or something like that, we would put that car on the road so the detectives could use it. The cost of maintaining them is a lot, because they're older cars, they get beat up.
No, the Edge, would that have any type of police package for an engine and?
No, I don't think,
No.
No?
just be that's why it was, specifically used for, so they're not pursuit rated or anything like that.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the cruises? No?
Well, I just want to commend you for revisiting the 5 cars every year philosophy. It really concerns me now, thinking back all these years that we've been just automatically replacing 5 cruises every year. So, thank you very much for looking at it with a different lens and coming up with more creative ways to move these vehicles around. Certainly, I don't think it's to your detriment that the information in front of us is not
No,
quite
not at all.
up to snuff. So if you were given that impression, that we don't anticipate that you put this together, but certainly, next year, it would be unacceptable if we continued down this vein.
And we could just,
Thank
if
you.
you want us to get you specific information on which cars we're replacing, we can do that directly.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You know.
We'll get that done by the end of the week.
in,
And the other thing, as far as the cars, I just want to say real quickly, is when we transferred over to the Ford Explorers, they're a more durable car, the engines, they're
Than the
more
Crown
durable
Vics.
than the
Yeah.
Crown Vics were. So that's kind of how things sort of changed, is we were seeing that the cars handled, they wore better than the Crown Vics, which weren't as quality of a vehicle as these Ford Explorers have been. That was one of the transitions. But we'll absolutely get all this information updated and have it forwarded to you through the town manager.
Great, thank you.
So, with that said, if we can convert the K-9 car, we want to take down one of the cruisers out of the capital outlay.
I guess I would want to, you know, what could we use the K-9 car for on here, obviously? You know, we would have to use it as an unmarked.
We couldn't use it as a cruiser, a Ford or
One of the difficulties is the K-9 vehicle is a Chevy Tahoe, so the gear that is transferred to the new cars, it's all geared for the Ford Explorers, the cage, the rifle rack, so there would be a cost to, probably a larger cost to make that into a police package versus the Explorers, where we already have the equipment that is transferred into the vehicles, so that you can safely transport prisoners and patrol regularly. Certainly that K-9 vehicle could be transferred at some point to a unmarked vehicle. That would probably be an easier, less expensive alternative.
Right, and, you know, I think you're correct in, you know, asking if we can start paring back cars, but also I have to be concerned about if we do add new personnel,
Yep.
now I need, you know, a place to put them, so.
we would have one more patrolman on one shift? How would you work the?
Are you going to be doing the
extra-
rotating one
Yeah,
like we'd
you're gonna
spoken
do
about?
You mean the fourth sector that we were
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously, I wouldn't be able to do that until, you know, we complete the process of, you know, getting the help. But yes, and that's why, you know, the need for the car, because I would include an extra car on the road.
So you would have 4 patrolmen with 1 rover?
Correct. That's the goal anyways.
Is that what we're currently doing now, or we don't have the rover now, right?
Some shifts do, most don't. Most is just, you know, in some nights, it's just 3 sectors and the sergeant.
I'm not so sure if it's too practical to attempt to bring back a canine car for regular cruiser use. The canine car gets beat up just by the dog being in there for a long, long time. I don't think it's really practical to think that you could take that after a number of years of use or whatever and put it back in a typical cruiser use.
I think it was only used a couple of years for K-9.
It's only 2015.
Yeah, it wasn't, we don't have a K-9.
You don't have a dog in your typical car sitting there all day long or all night.
Any other questions on the cruises? Chief, the portable radios.
Okay. So the current radios that we have now are about 10 years old, and as with the case with a lot of technical equipment, especially with Motorola, the older they get, the more difficult it is for them to service. They work fairly well, but you can't get parts, and in fact, Motorola, I don't believe, is servicing the ones we currently have. We've tried to piecemeal it a little bit, you know, buy some here, some new ones here, so what this would do would be to, I guess, get a total of, I think, 35 we were looking for. Yeah. And that would, you know, be able to outfit majority of the offices and have some surplus as well. Because we always have radios that are breaking down, and then an officer needs to have one in reserve, obviously, so we can use it.
Will the radios be GPS enabled?
They could be.
They're probably capabilities, but yeah. I don't know.
They have Bluetooth,
Okay.
all that. It's just all a matter of how you program it and how much you want to spend on programming.
So if you want to protect the officer and you can't get in touch with them, you could find out where the radio is.
I could double check with these are kinda in the middle of the road.
Okay.
The APX 4000 it's a decent radio. We have the APX 6000 and up. What we have for 91,000, would probably double if we went to the 6,000.
What's the life expectancy on both those models?
The ones we have now are great, it's just getting parts for them. We have, I have a dozen up in my office that it's not worth fixing.
Yeah.
I sent a few out, and it was $500-600 to get them repaired.
Oh, wow.
So as they've been breaking, we've been getting new ones each year, we've been getting 4 or 5, kinda distributing them out as far as that goes. But we're at the point right now where we don't have a spare radio. If someone's radio goes down.
There's no
Yeah.
replacements?
Actually, my radio is being used by one of the officers on the midnight shift.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on the radios? Seeing none? Chief, the rifle replacement.
Okay, this is a similar situation to the radios in the fact that the patrol rifles we have now are varying age, anywhere between 5 and 8 years old. It's, when they start to break down, it gets more expensive to fix them. The other aspect we're looking at is we're one of the few departments around that don't have suppressors. Now, our AR-15s are the loudest weapon we have. So if we do get any complaints from the range, it's usually the day or the night we're firing the AR-15. So this would cut down drastically on the noise, which not only affects the residents, but our people as well, as far as, things like that. So it's a timing thing. It's, the ones we have now are breaking down at different times. It's like the defibrillators. Every officer who's on the street signs one out. So they get used and they get rotated. And plus, when we train, all of them being used, so we need some back here to be utilized by the line cars too. So.
You guys carry Narcan too?
Yes.
Any questions on the,
I do.
yeah, go ahead, Teresa.
This is not on capital, this is on,
Budget?
on your statistics.
Okay.
So, just out of curiosity, I know this question came up a number of years ago, and
Yeah.
now it's like very, very clear. Something happened in 2016 with automobile accidents,
Yep.
and it's virtually doubled since 2015 every year. What do you attribute that to? That's a huge increase consistently.
Yeah, well, I think, given the rise of the amount of traffic in town, Oh.
Part of it was, back then, they were only counting the officers' crash reports. What they do when they do crash reports is go to, a lot of times they'll go with a smaller accident, and you're just doing a paperwork exchange, you're not doing the actual. So if we went back and counted the actual crashes that we went to, it'd probably be closer to the high number. That's what.
Okay.
Yeah, difference.
Thank you.
And I would also attribute it to, we do traffic counts in different areas of town at least twice a year. And the count's just, it's just a very popular town. It's a cut through for a lot of people, and traffic just seems to keep getting worse and worse.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions, Chief, on your budget or your capital improvement, or?
No, I think it's a fair budget. We try and cut where we can, and look for areas that I'd rather be slightly over than have to come back and say, hey, I need more money. So it's that balance, and I think this is a fair budget.
Well, congratulations, good job.
Thank you.
Also, Chief Kavanaugh, want to come up and we can discuss, congratulations on your promotion. Yeah. Page 36, everyone?
34?
36 for central dispatch.
Oh, the James dispatch for us.
Chiefs, do you want to get started on the budget? Central dispatch?
You wanna go over the overview, chief, jump in as we go?
The overtime?
The overview, just of the budget.
Okay, so, as far as the overall budget increases and things that you see here, we're trying to adapt, you know, a little more to the always changing atmosphere in dispatch. We constantly seem to be hiring. It's difficult, they have a lot of turnover in there. And because of that, you know, issues like overtime and things like that, we feel this budget's more reflective of what an accurate interpretation of what goes on in dispatch. So, I mean, we can go line by line, but,
Well, the two I'm looking at in
Yeah.
particular is full-time has gone up by 83,000, and your overtime has doubled to 100,000.
yeah.
So what we can say about the overtime is, obviously it's mine and Chief's first year really looking at this from an outside perspective. Even though I was in the position last year, we didn't have much to do with the dispatch budget. It was kind of done already, and we were told, hey, don't worry about it, we're all set. Really looked at this and noticed that in the last number of years, the overtime has been kept status quo because that's the amount that the state grants us back, is 50,000. So that's been kept the same. However, over the last few years, we've exceeded that $50,000 number. So we took a look at the dispatch budget so far this year, and just so we're, you know, can kind of put it into perspective, and like Chief said, we have a lot of issues with retention. Their overtime right now is $15,000 over budget. We're already at 65,000 out of the 50 that we, and this was actually a couple of weeks ago, so it's actually higher at this point.
We're at 26,539
Over.
right now, so
And
So-
how many dispatches are you down right
we're down 4.
now?
4.
Down 4?
So we have,
Is that
yeah,
due to injury, or is that due
Nope, we
to?
had 2 join the fire department, so that dropped our staffing down. We were already hiring for 1.
mhm.
We had 1 on.
Yeah. Well, right, so we're trying to, we have one in the academy now, we have another one that's starting, so, and we have an opening that we're currently trying to fill. We have had issues with retention, it's not really a secret, but as far as the overtime goes, that was the biggest thing that we're looking at, is trying to give you a real view of what we see. And that $100,000 number might still be low, we don't know yet. One of the things we're trying to do is, you noted the additional money in the line item for salary. Part of that's contractual.
Okay.
The other part is, we've asked the manager to endorse an additional dispatcher. Part of the reason for that is that Corey, who's our dispatch supervisor, over the years, that job has kind of morphed. So he used to do, or April Kingston, when she was a supervisor, used to kind of play this kind of middle ground role where she would kind of dispatch and try to do paperwork on the other end. With all the grant funding that Corey currently gets us, and the QA, QI he needs to be doing on calls to remain compliant with state, it really takes up a lot of his time. He spends a significant amount of his day just doing paperwork for the state. He's actively sought out grants for us. The one person we have in the academy now is actually their salary and the cost to train them is being borne by the state because of the paperwork he's done. So to take him off of that and put him back on the desk, it doesn't help us. We're going to become non-compliant again. We're not going to be eligible for any of these grants. We're not going to be eligible for that $50,000 reimbursement for overtime. So that's what I'm asking for, or we're asking for rather, is to put an additional dispatcher in there to help with the increased call volume, which you gave us extra personnel last year, which we greatly appreciate. I know you're looking at giving the police the same thing. That's because our call volume's gone up. They handle all of our calls, so there's an increase in the calls that you do see, and then there's an enormous increase in the calls that we don't log them. You know, they answer the phone, hey, can I talk to Chief Desmond? Hold on, I'll transfer you. Things like that, where they're 15 seconds, 20 seconds. But throughout the day, those add up. So they're spending a lot of their time doing things like that as well.
What do you think the retention problem is? Is it because we were below salary
Money.
or money?
It's absolutely money. I know that,
Are we in queue now, with level with other towns?
I was gonna say, yeah, how are we with other
cities?
towns?
Corey, still on the lower end.
We're mid to low. I'd say we're not, certainly not as bad as we were. There's a lot of people leaving for other departments, other agencies, and that's not really the case now, as bad as it was, but it is still a limitation.
And the manager has done, in the past couple contracts, he has really toed the line with trying to get them, good raises without kind of getting the heat on the other end from the select board or finance committee. I mean, he's being responsible with it, while trying to catch them up. So it's a slow process, but it is happening. And like Corey said, most of our dispatchers in there now, besides the ones we just hired, and even the ones who just came over to me, have been there for 4 or 5 years, so they've been there for a while. It's not like they're rolling out the door like they used to, so we're getting there.
We're about standard with the national average. If you were to look up stories for 911 staffing, it's across the industry. It's hovering around 28, 29% nationwide. So I hate to say we're where we should be, because it's obviously not acceptable to have this high turnover, but it's expected when people are joining law enforcement, fire departments. They're waiting on civil service tests, and we attract that kind of a candidate. They want to get in the door. They want to know about policing or fire. So some of that is to be expected. Some of it was fiscal. So it's starting to calm down a little bit. We're recruiting and trying to recruit people that are interested in this as a career, not just as a stepping stone.
And I think the difficult part for Corey is, unlike, the chief and I, we might get some advance notice of a retirement. He's lucky to get 2 weeks. And then he's into interviewing, testing, and rehiring and training again. It's just never ending cycle.
How long is the training period for dispatcher?
We have a design program of 3 months of on-the-job training. If we can get people into the State Dispatch Academy, which is 5 weeks long, we'll do so. And that, they vary when they hold that, so we don't expect people to sit there and wait and cost salary while they're not getting certified. So we will send them to class piecemeal if we need to. But typically around 3 months is if we can get them off training sooner, if they're picking it up, if they have experience, we can reduce that time and get them on the line faster. And we've done that in the past, so that's about right. The 3 months is about standard for us.
So if we're on the low to mid-range on the salary though, we're not getting them from other departments?
That's correct. It's few and far between. We have people that have, they are attracted to our town, or the schedule. Our schedule is competitive with other places. We have 4 and 2, which mirrors the police officers. A lot of dispatchers coming from 5 and 2 or 12-hour shifts, and they'd rather have this kind of stability. So they're staying in the field, but it's not for fiscal reasons. They're taking a hit because my life-work balance is a little bit better.
Thank you.
Just real quickly, it's a high-stress environment. It's a difficult job because you can go, not that long without getting a serious call, and then a medical aid comes, and it's not really, it's not for everybody that applies for the position. So that's another part of the difficulty, that it's a high-stress environment, and it's challenging. We're fortunate that the dispatches that we have, we can handle.
I give them a lot of
quality.
credit, because you're right, it is a high stress, and you never know what is going to be on the other end of the line. That's the thing.
I have a question regarding what constitutes the overtime. Is that primarily filling in for the lack of dispatches, or?
So it's personnel, so lack of dispatchers is part of it, but vacations, maternity leave, we've had a little bit of that in the past year. So just things like that, time off is typically what it is, but right now we're filling gaps. And we have to fill gaps with overtime, and that's kind of our biggest issue.
I guess my concern is that I think it's a good idea that you're hiring another dispatcher, and it sounds like you're doing a great job where you're at.
Sure.
Appreciate the grants. My concern, and I think you're very well aware of how we feel about overtime. So I look at it and I think, well, how much overtime are we absorbing every year because we're not paying enough to attract people that will stay longer? I don't like the fact that the town of Wilmington is on the low end of anything. If we're on the low end or mid to low end of a pay scale, we're not attracting higher-end people.
Well, one of the
And
things
that,
that.
and that's a concern of mine in any department.
I agree with you. I mean, I would love to be able to walk over there and say, okay, we're gonna give you guys all a,
Right.
$10,000 raise to get us in line with the middle upper end, but
Right.
obviously then you would have some uproar on that as well. Like I said, I think the manager's done a good job in the last couple contracts with dispatch. I think they were very fair. They're probably, a little higher than what, some of the other bargaining units got. So he has made a concerted effort to catch them up, with salaries and the night differential as well. And this overtime number now, I mean, we're hoping that it will reduce. Right now, we would rather not come back to you next year and say, yeah, well, we know we budgeted 50,000 again like we always have, and we've always gone over, so now we need more money. We're hoping that once we get this other person on, we get to full staff, that this number will stabilize. It'll go down to, what we need to cover vacation, personal time, some sick time, and the incidental stuff that you really can't, you don't know it's coming. Maternity
Right.
leave, leaves
But
out,
my
stuff like
concern is that you still have the underlying problem that you're not paying people enough to stay. And that ends up just going onto another line item, which is overtime.
It's still costing us.
It's still costing us, and it's costing us time and a half. And that's the part that bothers me, is I would rather have us see us be able to attract people that will stay, and have that remain on one line, and the overtime be a minimal number that is covering what you mentioned earlier, vacation and sick time, things like that. Again, managing through overtime is not, it's not good management practice, and it's not
I would just
fiscally
add, though, that
conservative.
We, there is going to be a level of turnover in dispatch, and I think as Corey indicated, to some measure, that's the nature of the position. It serves as a recruiting ground for police and fire personnel. We've had a number of future police officers and firefighters who have gotten their start in dispatch, so I would expect that's gonna continue regardless of what the salary is. There's clearly an element of people, and it's hard to pin down a percentage, but there's a core group of people in dispatch who have decided that this is a career for them, and they've been there for 7, 8, 9 years. Probably, maybe 4 or 5 of the folks that have been in dispatch. And then there's another element that we see who see the ad, they think it's an opportunity for them, changing career. They sign on, and we've also had a number of people that after they've been there for 6 months or whatever, they decide that this isn't for me. It's the stress. It's not what I anticipated. It's whatever the circumstances are, and then they decide that they move on. So certainly salary. There's no question salary is one element of it, but I suspect even adjusting salaries upwards to be in the middle to high, there's still going to be a regular level of turnover. I don't know, Corey, if you can speak to, say, some of the towns that are in the upper echelon, Lexington, Cambridge. I mean, they still have turnover.
Correct, yeah, and that's in all fairness, it's not like we are doing anything bad or different from those other cities or towns. I mean, Cambridge has, just for an example, has a very, very high starting salary. They have a lot more people on their staff. They have a lot more incentives. They have a lot more stuff. And they're still in the 25 to 30% turnover rate. It's just, for whatever reason, there's not enough people that, it's a very small percentage that can do the job, and then the ones that can do, it's keeping those people happy. And striking that work-life balance where they're not burnt out, stressed out, so that, citizens are getting snapped at on the phone, making sure that the vacation time is reasonable. We have people that now, as far as the overtime is concerned, I don't want my people working 60 hours, 64 hours a week. It's not, we're not looking to manage that way. It's just, we're doing what we can because we can't draw staff any longer. It's gonna be 2 at a time, just for safety reasons. And, you know, unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do to mitigate that besides do our best to give them the work environment and the schedule and the incentives to stay here and in the field. It's not like people are leaving for greener pastures in 911. Most of the time, they're just, okay, I've done enough, I'm stressed out, I'm burned out, it's gotta be something better for me out there, maybe. So that's the other side of it. If they're not staying in public safety, like the manager and the chief were saying, you know, I've had 2 of my dispatchers join Wilmington Fire. People that I was hired with are now police officers. So that's part of it, but it's not the entire picture. So
You touched on, my next question is, do you dispatch, because of the stress on the job, do your dispatchers do a shift and then another full shift on overtime?
sometimes, yep, they'll do double shifts. We don't allow triples, as a matter of safety. 24-hour shifts,
That's not good for anyone.
we're not exempt, so we don't get to violate labor law, so we don't, and nobody's held over more than 16 hours, but there are people that do multiple doubles in a row, just by nature of, we have training, that we have to have covered, and like I said, we can't drop 2 as low as I can go. So it's stressful when you only have a small pool of people, like right now we're at 7 or 8, so that 7 or 8 people is now responsible for filling, you know, all 3 shifts for the 24/7 coverage, 2 at a time. So you run out of people real fast, and it's just, that's where the overtime starts getting out of control a little bit.
No, that's gonna be difficult on the individual too.
Yep, I mean, and it's
That's-
something that I still, you know, I will go in and work, you know, to try to alleviate some of that. In the past, I've gone in and jumped on a rotation, like the chief was saying, but everything else goes by the wayside. If I'm just working a radio console, I can't be working on budget in the middle of it and going back and forth, and it's just, all of that has to focus, and that's why we're trying to get the additional person, kind of leave me more administrative, so.
Well, I hope that does provide some kind of relief to the department. It's been like this for years. I'm glad to see something changing.
Dispatch does a great job, but it is a stressful one.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And 50,000 of the overtime is kind of a grant.
50,000 of it is a grant, yes, it's reimbursable after the fiscal year, though. That's
Okay.
what we found out is, that once we put in for it, it comes in about August, Jeff?
It's August,
There's a
and
general
that's
fund.
been a long-standing frustration, quite frankly, is that, and we've had this grade for many, many years, but it doesn't really help us as a practical matter because it comes in, goes into the general fund and free cash, which is nice, but doesn't help in terms of the annual budget.
And it's not guaranteed, or is it?
The
Right.
state is, by statute, it's all based on formulas, call volume, populations, its size. We are at 66,000, I think, this year is what I ended up getting rated, so, but we won't know when we see that money. So we submit things to the state, the grant paperwork gets submitted, and they do electronic transfers whenever their paperwork is complete, so to speak. So that's where we see the lag. We're trying to get more in line with, you know, as soon as the fiscal year starts, you know, planning and budgeting that way accordingly. And that's kind of where a lot of these numbers are coming from, is it's tough to get reimbursed if you don't have it already. It's difficult to go into the negative, and that's not fair to the town, not knowing what we're doing with the money, so that's part of it.
Do you think that you could put a notation here that we could be receiving, you know, the grant to offset part of the overtime? Because that would be helpful in years
So
ahead. It doesn't mean that you'd be committing to it.
No, you could say
But just,
historically, you've been
You
getting
know,
X amount of
we
dollars.
hope
per
to
year.
be receiving a grant, or
We can add that.
word it in a way
Yep.
that doesn't commit
We can add
you or
that.
anybody else, but just continues to give us the heads up.
Yeah, the state contract they'll start deciding on grant now. They're starting the 911 commissions taking votes for the grant guidelines, and that's where they establish what the ratio will be. And that's where we'll know what we get. We take wireless direct calls, so that was an additional, I think it was around $5,000 when we opted to take wireless calls directly, which was just good practice anyways, but they actually incentivized us to do that. So yes, we're getting more, we're trying to get more grant money annually, but it's, we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Contractual services, training and miscellaneous?
wanna go through those, Corey?
So one of the things that we are responsible for is 16 hours of continuing education for every dispatcher, which is all grantable, and that's part of that grant outlay. So this year for that amount, we can get up to a certain amount, so it's a needs-based grant, so as people are attending training, we tell the state this is what it's going to cost us in personnel time, which can either be overtime or straight time, depending on the classes and the personnel going, and the amount of money that the classes cost. Those costs are continuing to increase by contract, the overtime rates, and again, you have to budget that to get reimbursed for it. So historically in the past, that we've kind of lowballed that a little bit, and I've been able to make do. They changed the structure of the grants a little bit this year so that we are going to ironically end up with more money, thankfully, so I can get my people trained and cover that cost. With the high turnover, we also have to consider the fact that it costs $379 for EMD certification per person. So if I hire 3 and 2 don't make it, we're out. So we're just trying to be more realistic and budget accordingly for what we're actually seeing for turnover, and make sure that we're putting the money in so that we can, in fact, get people the training that they need to stay within compliance with the state. So that's where that increase is coming from. Miscellaneous contractual is similar. There's cost of the radios, service contracts, things along those lines that we have, especially with our EMD program, this computer program. That cost is going up, and that's a vendor control. There's just not much I can, unfortunately, there's not much I can do about it. So we've tried to keep that steady, and it's going up. So that's where that is increasing as well.
When you say the grant for training, is that different?
That's correct.
From the other $50,000 grant?
That's correct. They're two separate entirely.
Okay, so how much did we get for grant last year? Do you remember?
So we were not eligible for some of the grant money because of the way that the guidelines changed in the grant. The expectation for documentation was different. We weren't acceptable to the state to get money, which we've now fixed. So it was a medical director had to be covering dispatch, and there was debate over whether or not that was going to be the fire department's medical director or police department. We squared that away, so that was part of the reason why. So we weren't eligible for as much grant last year.
This is part of the reason why we pulled him off and put him in an office, because he needs to be. This stuff changes, it's so dynamic that if you don't stay up on it, you're constantly chasing the bus, and
then you're losing money.
right, and he's done an excellent job at getting us caught back up with the things that we needed. So he's been worth every penny that we've spent on him to put him in an office.
Good. Any other questions on contractual? The material and supplies?
Office supplies, no change. The uniform cost is contractual, so the union bargained for more uniform items, and we're seeing a changeover from the way that we purchase items. Now we're going to the uniform store like the fire department does, and that just costs money. So the dispatch will have to be issued an initial set of pants, because right now we don't have a uniform set of pants. Dispatchers were, the manager, they bargained that in, so that's that first increase where it's like, whoa, sticker shock, and then it will go down because we won't have to maintain. Historically, this will be a one-time, hopefully a one-time cost. It won't be recurring at this level. So we just have to get the initial issue out, and then we can maintain. So that this is just that one-time contractual increase.
And then the furnishings and equipment?
So what we're looking to do is, we have 24/7 use chairs. We've gone through a lot of different vendors, and we just wear them out. There's always a body in the seat. They break. There's no better way to put it. So we find ourselves having to replace, and I've had warranty service. They've come in, they've serviced the chairs. They last a little while. It's constant upkeep. And this is just kind of what we have to budget to make sure that people are you know, they're stuck in a chair for 8 hours a ride, and it's, they kind of want nice chairs, so it just, that's the kind of cost that we have to incur. We also have started to have a professional cleaning service, and they'll come in and they'll do maintenance on our furniture, replace screws that are loose, kind of service the consoles, keep them up and running. That cost is also included in that.
Yeah, this is not a, like, wipe it down to everything. They're actually in the back, in the components, vacuuming, cleaning things out. Like, this is not something that we want our own people doing, because last year, one of our consoles is, and we'll get to this point in a minute, is they're so old, the equipment's so old that this professional company came in and was using it and, or cleaning it, and it wound up shorting out a computer. So, we don't, this is like they're actually in the back of these things.
Taking radio components.
Right.
Moving them, safely moving them out so that we're not destroying things. Power supplies are very sensitive, so they go in. And this year, we historically do it in January, right around cold and flu season, try to keep the sickness levels down so we can save overtime. So what we'll do is they'll go in and they'll show me what they've taken out, and it's usually about a gallon Ziploc bag full of detritus and dirt. So, and it's things that we wouldn't necessarily expect public buildings to, or even want public buildings to go in and start messing with the sensitive electronics that we have. So that's why we started doing that. And we're now including that in our budget request.
This will hopefully prolong some of the equipment with breathability and ventilation and stuff like that, so we're hoping to do with that.
And then you've got a capital expense,
Okay.
$450,000.
So that is, the $450,000 you see in front of you is year one of a 3-year project. Our infrastructure is old. We have the radio system on both sides, police and fire. It's old. It needs some serious attention. The reason we put it under dispatch is they control it. It's kind of their main thing. So that's instead of putting it under the police side or the fire side, we put it on the dispatch side. What this would do is it'd be a phased approach, and in each one of the 3 years, they would be replacing components, wiring, antennas, radios, repeaters, comparators, voters, all the stuff that makes our system work. We're going to go to a complete fiber system. So fiber's running most of our spots now, so we need to do some connections. It would also include a microwave backup system, which is something huge. We don't have any redundancy right now. Last year, we had our antenna on our main station go down, and we ran on PD1 overnight. A couple months ago, Chief's radio system went out, and I was scrambling to get radios to have his guys work on the fire side because they were trying to dispatch via cell phone, their personal cell phones. So we're seeing some breakdowns in the system. It's very old, and we need to kind of get back on track with that. Unfortunately, we're in the position where we need to do a wholesale changeout, which is why you're seeing such an expense. What we'd like to do is, once this wholesale changeout is done, whichever vendor we wind up with, we're going to ask them for some sort of preventative maintenance and expectancy of components. So if you tell me every 8 and 9 years or 5 years, you're going to have to put $100,000 aside or whatever it is to replace these things, and we'll do it so that we're not coming back to you guys and saying, hey, I need another $3 million now because the prices have gone up and we need to replace all this stuff again because we've neglected it for the last number of years. So that's what that 450 is.
Is it the original system from when they?
It's not original when Chief was here, but it is, I think most of it is original to when this building was built.
So you're looking at 20 years.
Some of the stuff that was at least in place then, and
Not longer.
there's some new stuff. I know we had to, when the police system went down, we had to replace a few things in there. But the things that we did replace with, we made sure that we could reuse them in this project. We're not just discarding them. So we have been pretty mindful of the fact that when things break, we make sure that we can replace them with stuff that'll be compatible with our new system.
It's not acceptable to not have a backup. We need, fortunately, we have, we used each other's, but, obviously, it could be a serious situation if we
Well,
can't
the
communicate.
technology's out there.
It is.
And we might as well make use of it.
Right.
It's public safety. We have to have it. The dispatch center remodel
Mhm.
for $194,000?
So this would be the second part of, last year, you guys approved, a new Zetron system and, a new, receiving system for the fire alarm. What this would do, all the furniture in that room is about 20 years old. And the floor it's actually a sunken floor. So we're seeing some issues with the floor, the stability of that. So with the manager, we talked about it and said, well, we can redo the floor, and that's gonna be part of that 194, or we can redo the furniture. But either way, you have to take one out to do the other, so we do it at once, we're not paying, so right now, if we just did the floor project, we have to pay a company to come in, disconnect all the equipment in there, and another company come in, take out all the furniture, replace the floor, put all that stuff back, and then when we wanna replace furniture, we gotta do it again.
We're talking about
So-
4 or 5 vendors at a time,
Yeah.
added hourly or service costs, so that's
Is
fiscally irresponsible.
So
Is
what?
dispatch going to be down for any length of time?
No, so what we're actually gonna do is, we're gonna have a mobile PSAP set up, so
Okay.
mobile dispatch set up, so that we don't miss a beat. They'll do the cutover, the state gets involved, but there's been, huge changes in dispatch furniture for ergonomics and stuff like that, standing desks, all the screens come up, and the way that we would set up the room now with the components all kind of being in one central location as opposed to each station, we'd be able to kind of reconfigure the room to make it a little bit more user-friendly for them. So that's what the plan is to be able to replace the furniture and the floor in one fell swoop and be done with it. And then again, have some sort of idea on going forward, how do we do this in a phased approach so that we're not coming back for a wholesale change later on and saying, hey, we need all this money.
Any questions on capital? Seeing none? Thank you on that one, I appreciate that.
Not to cut into Bill's time, but did you have any questions about animal control? We kind of glossed over that. That's on page 37, I believe. Could probably answer any.
I guess more animal calls with the overtime?
Yes and no. So when we were talking to the town manager about the way Chris responds to calls off duty, he's basically hour for hour, which is kind of well below the industry standard. Most of his counterparts get at least, some get a 4-hour minimum, some get a 2. So we kind of worked out an agreement that on weekends, Chris would get a 2-hour minimum when he gets called up. So potentially it could, lead, I don't know if it'll double it, but at least we have a cushion there should he get busy.
How's the new vehicle working out?
Good, he loves it. Yeah, he loves it.
Any questions on animal control? Seeing none? Thank you, appreciate that. Chief Desmond, Chief Kavanaugh, thank you for having us here tonight.
No.
Absolutely.
Definitely appreciate that. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you, enjoy the rest of your night. Take care, guys. Next is fire. Chief Kavanaugh, do you want to start on the budget?
Absolutely. So I got my deputy here, Deputy Posey. It's his
Congratulations.
second
on
official
your
day on the
appointment.
job. So, with the fire, you're gonna see, a reduction in overtime of about 400,000. One of the reasons for that, obviously, is the additional manpower that, you guys gave us last year, which we, again, appreciate. We have all of our, all but one of our new hires going right now. The other new hire has signed the list and is currently deployed to Afghanistan, so still got a spot, but everyone's hitting the academy March, April, and May, and we should have them back June, July, and August, which will be good. That'll hit us all, some before the fiscal year starts, and the other 2 very shortly after. So one of the things I looked at with the manager on that was with the additional person, we're not sure how much we need on that, but for the impact, I believe it's 800 to more than cover us for overtime for next year. So
How are you doing this year?
so this year, we're pretty much right on budget with what the manager had projected for last year.
Okay.
If we continue at the current rate that we're at, I have us coming in about 1.128.
Okay.
So we're right there, very little bit of wiggle room, but we've also had a couple of prolonged injuries and a military deployment. So we've had quite a few hiccups, if you will.
On the prolonged injuries, how
Yep.
long?
So, 2 of them have been out over a year, one of them's been out a little over 2 years. So, we're trying our best to get them back at this point, but that's it's out of our hands.
Just to comment to some measure, and obviously some of this is confidential, but, you know, I just want to make it clear that we're not just sitting on these cases and letting them run. There's one case, without getting into the particulars of the medical situation, we wanted to provide the individual with an opportunity to return. There were some medical circumstances that the person was out for a period of time. It was, I think, even over a year at this point, and eventually we went through a process within the last, 6 months, where we pursued a involuntary retirement. So it's always a balancing act because, you know, you want to legitimately give someone an opportunity to recover if they can. This wasn't a broken arm type of situation that you can figure, okay, it's going to be X number of weeks and the doctor should be able to return them to work. It was, you know, another type of circumstance. So we try to give the person the opportunity, and as it turns out, in our judgment, based upon, and we had medical personnel involved, didn't appear that the person was going to be able to return. They were not necessarily in agreement with that, but ultimately pursued the involuntary, and that's still pending. So as a consequence, you know, it extends the time period. We have other individuals, again, one in particular that I'm thinking of that was a work-related injury, gave them, you know, time through their treatment and so on. They're actually being seen by a town doctor, I think it was the appointment.
Beginning of March.
Beginning of March. You know, and hopefully things turn out well for this person. But, you know, I guess the point being that we want to be mindful of giving people an opportunity to return. On the other hand, it's clearly not acceptable to have people out for, you know, extended periods of time. We want to get people back as soon as we can, while recognizing that circumstances sometimes don't allow us to do that as soon as we'd like to.
And the third case?
That one we're hoping to get a clearance for work in the next week or so. That was an injury that was, there were multiple injuries that kind of were masked by the original one, so as one cleared up, kind of the ailment on the other one was happening. So that one is, we've been following it closely. It's just that we're looking to get clearance on them for the second week in March.
That's great.
So we're looking forward to that.
Okay. Thank you.
So again, like I said, the overtime we've reduced by $400,000. The part-time clerk, you'll see that go up. Part of that, we have a little bit of a difficult time, you know, keeping a part-time clerk. And Jeff, in conversations with our previous part-time clerk, recognized that and was able to adjust that pay scale, which has worked out well for us. We have a new part-time clerk up there. She's working out extremely well. Very happy to be here. So, you know, that helped us quite a bit. There's everything else kind of contractual, pretty much the same going down the line.
The SAFER grant, that's over 3 years, right?
Correct. That's 3 years. So the first 2 years will give us a 75% reimbursement,
Okay.
and the last year will give us 35%.
Congratulations on that one.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that was
awesome.
amazing.
That's great for the town.
That was absolutely awesome.
And you weren't even chief then.
So the expectations now?
I'm working on it. I can only do what I can do. We're working on a couple right now, actually.
Oh, it's greatly appreciated.
That's for sure. Contractual services?
Yep, so the contractual services, I actually, we level funded those. I just kind of left them alone. I think right now with what we have, I kind of contacted our big money vendors, the ones that we spend the most with, if you
Yeah.
will. And none of them have indicated that they're seeing any sort of real increase. So I feel comfortable with keeping that level funded there.
The firearm dispatch.
Fire alarm and dispatch, we went up on that slightly just to maintain the systems. That's part of it. We're aging, so we still have to maintain what we have until we can hopefully get that other process going to replace a bunch of that stuff.
Okay. Materials and supplies?
Yep, so we level funded those as well. Same thing, I feel like after contacting our biggest vendors, they're not anticipating any increase on us, and
Okay.
we usually come in with a little bit of room to spare, so we kept that the same as well.
And then you've got the furnishings and equipment of 40,000?
Yep, so we're looking to, with the new people that we hire, we need lockers. One of the things that we kind of overlooked last year, so we need some clothing lockers for the bunk rooms, we need some gear lockers for their actual structural firefighting gear. Also, the refrigerator we have upstairs it's a commercial unit, and the life expectancy on it is 20 years with proper maintenance. Ours has gone 20 years with improper maintenance, so we're on borrowed time. So we're hoping that we can continue that. But we looked at doing a regular, a Samsung or something you could get from a Lowe's, but with the amount of open and close and stuff like that, and even talking to some of the salespeople at Doyen's and Drake and Appliance, they said if you're putting it in a firehouse kitchen, you need commercial level stuff.
Yeah.
So there was that as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of, how are your accommodations up there? You've hired
We're tight.
8 new people and,
Yep, we're very tight. So we changed our old, we called it the library. It was an extra office is basically
Yeah.
what it was. We've turned that into a bedroom. We've moved some beds out of rooms to make rooms for lockers when they get here, but right now the new people we have are using totes and makeshift kind of hangers until we can get their lockers here. And then it's tight. I mean, it's not the most comfortable of accommodations, but it's what we have right now, so it's what we're working on.
and how are the shifts manned now?
Right now, we're still at, we have 2 lieutenants and 7 firefighters. We also have the new personnel that we've hired that are still waiting to go to the academy. We don't count them yet. They don't count towards manpower for us, because if we catch a fire or something like that, they don't know enough. And I can't, in good conscience, put one of them in a fire situation or ask them to cut up a vehicle while someone's life's on the line and don't have them properly trained. So right now, they're in a training capacity, so technically our shifts are at 11,
Okay.
but they're not, they're really still the 9.
Are they on the ambulance at all, or?
They are in the ambulance, they ride third, but the problem that we have with counting them, and there was a number of years ago, there were a couple of chiefs that went by the mantra of, well, they're EMTs, I can run them. Well, yeah, that's great, but when you catch a house fire, I'm already understaffed for house fire. NFPA tells me I need 16 members on the first alarm if I have an aerial device. I have 9. So if I take the 9th and he's on vacation, so I slide the new guy in, I don't have 9, I have 8. And now I have actually 7 because I need someone to babysit number 9, because he doesn't know what he's doing yet. And what'll happen is, they'll look at him and say, hey, go do this. And if they don't know, we get an out-of-town chief that comes in and helps, which we often do. We help each other. And he grabs a guy and says, hey, come and do this. He's not going to tell chief, no, he's brand new. He's going to do it. And now, again, you could have someone in some serious danger. So we try to not do that. We teach them. They, it's the, crawl, walk, run. We show them everything. We teach them all the equipment. We get them to the trucks. They're riding with someone with an experienced EMT that's kind of showing them. They just watch, and then we get them in and say, okay, why don't you start doing vitals? Why don't you start talking to patients? We do some splinting. Then as they're getting more comfortable, this guy kind of backs off and just supervises, for lack of a better term. And we've actually had really good luck with that. I think we get better EMTs out of it, and we get better firefighters out of it.
That's great. The status on the new truck?
Status on the new truck, so it's actually in welding now. We're looking at end of April, early May.
Nice.
So They're actually, it's a little longer than what I was anticipating, what I wanted, but they are well under their contractual 365 to 400 day mark.
Okay.
So that we'll still get it, and probably, we signed in June, I think, was when we finally finished the tweaks on the pre-con letter and everything like that. We signed it in June, so they're coming in April, May. They're still
They're still
11
under-
months as opposed to
Yeah.
13 or 14.
Yeah.
So we're doing all right.
That's great. That's great. Any questions on the budget itself for the chief? Capital. Oh, is there a
Yeah,
question?
just one, how many actual people have you now put on, Bill?
So since when, chief? 'Cause I put on a lot.
Well, I
You
mean,
probably wouldn't
since last
recognize
year
more than
when you
3
got-
people up there.
We got the money for you for the,
So we've put on 8, however, one of them is a fill-in. We had a member leave the department, and he's now currently a member of FDNY. So we put on 8 to fill 9 spots. So as far as the 8 additional that were approved, 7 out of the 8 are hired. And the 8th one is, by civil service rule, is hired until he declines a job. He has 90 days from the day he comes back to notify us that he's willing to go through the process. He can come back. I've emailed this person, and they told me that they're gonna be back sometime the end of June.
Okay.
They have 90 days from the day they return, and they could wait till the 89th day and then tell me they're not interested, and I have to start over. So that's kinda where we're at with it. That's civil service. It's kinda,
It's tough.
it's what we're with, yep.
Yeah.
It is. Any other questions on the budget? Seeing none, capital outlay, chief?
Absolutely. So in the capital, let's see what we got. The vehicles there. So for fiscal '21, so we're looking to replace F1. So our current F1, and please, you're gonna follow along with this, because we're trying to do a little something here. If I were to buy a forestry vehicle from a manufacturer, I'm looking anywhere between $125,000 and $150,000. Currently, I have a diesel pickup truck that I could use, and I could retrofit it. So that's what I wanna do. If I retrofit that truck with skid plates, an upgraded suspension, and a drop-on flatbed with the skid pump, looking at about $32,250 for that project.
What year's the truck?
It's 2008. It's got, what does that truck have on it? Do you remember what it has? It's about 60,000. For a diesel is not bad.
No, that is.
So I'd like to do that and prolong the life of that vehicle, because if I'm gonna buy a forestry truck, I'm gonna want a diesel pickup truck anyway.
Yeah,
That's our current, we call it Car 3, it's our utility truck.
okay.
What I'd like to do is then replace that, because my current forestry truck's 24 years old. Replace that with a new gas pickup truck, which I'd be looking for $52,700. And that would be probably a 3/4 ton gas pickup truck, extended cab with a bed, lights, lettering, nothing fancy for equipment on it.
Okay.
It's just literally pick up hose at fire scenes, do training, stuff like that.
Okay.
So that project, all in told, was $84,950 as opposed to
100 and someone.
100 and some odd for one.
Thank you for thinking
Creativity.
outside of the box.
We tried.
Yeah.
We tried. Then we had, so 32,000 we're asking for a power loader. What a power loader is, it goes in the back of the ambulance. And basically it's a track that comes out, it takes all the way to the stretcher.
Yeah.
And it lowers the person on the ground or lifts them up, and then you slide them in. It's pretty much one-hand operation. We recommend two, but you can do one. We have it on our current A1. 2 years ago, we had an ambulance that had a motor swap. So we ran 3 ambulances for about a year. So our A1 ran all the time, A2 and A3, if you will, swapped. month on, month off. So
Okay.
A2 currently has lower miles than what we would normally see on a truck to replace it. So we want to prolong the life of it. When prolonging the life of it, I'd like to also prolong my guys and put this in there, it prevents back injuries. It's a lot safer for the patient too. We already have the power cot, so we don't need to add the additional $15,000 for that accessory. And then this piece of equipment, while prolonging A2's life, can be used to transfer into the new ambulance when I come beg for that next time. So that'll reduce the cost of that vehicle.
Okay.
How long do you think this ambulance has left? A2?
Hoping a year, maybe 2, depending on the mileage, but probably a year. Honestly, what I do about budget time next year is I'd have Kenny and the guys down the garage take a real good hard look at it and decide if it's worth continuing to run it. A lot of the times, the biggest problems with these trucks is suspension gets beat, and
Yeah.
they get kind of destroyed. So I would have them really kind of give me what they feel as though is the good or bad on it.
And this
then
we can swap out with the new ambulance?
Yep, this I can actually have removed out of this truck and put into the next truck that we buy. So it's not a one thing and then we sell it to some, it goes with the truck.
And
This'll-
hopefully you're looking at reduced back injuries too.
That's the plan. That's the biggest reason why we had it in A1, and that's why I believe in it for A2. So I'd like to have that as well.
And you got 39,000 for radios?
Yep, so this is portable radios. We have more people, we need more radios. Currently, I don't have any extras, so if we have people come in for structure fires, callbacks for medicals, details, blasting, any of that stuff, we're kind of using the old, not really what they should be using radios. So just it's a continuation of personnel costs and expanding the department, really.
Okay. And your current radios, they're okay?
Current radios are good, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
How much does one radio cost?
Depending on the model, it can be anywhere from $5,000 to $9,000. It's just kind of depends on what we wind up with. So
Now, you've got infrared cameras too for?
we do. We have thermal images, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we have them on engine 4, engine 3 in the tower.
Okay, so you don't have the ones that are attached to the?
We were the first ones in the state to have those. And
Okay.
When we first got them, they were, we probably shouldn't have had them yet. We were kind of a little bit too small of a department to be playing guinea pig. So there was issues with the batteries. You had to turn the display on and then turn the camera on. You had to do it in the right sequence so they wouldn't link up. And then you forget to turn one off, it'd be dead. Just this past year, I was able to kind of finagle some money in our budget. There was an upgrade to them, so there was a free kind of firmware patch that we could have done, or there was a firmware patch. I think it cost $100 a mask, and it changed kind of the scale they were seeing and the way it linked up, and it was well worth the money. We had all 12 of those cameras redone, and I've heard nothing from the guys negative about it. It's what we thought it was going to be in the beginning.
That's great. Good.
But we've had those for 4 years now, 5 years. We've had those for a long time, and they're actually, they help. They're a helpful tool to have when they work and how they work, so they're pretty good.
Great. Any questions for the chief on capital? Any other comments, chief, or?
No, we appreciate everything you guys have done for us. It really does help, and pretty soon we'll be up to full snuff and
Thank
good
you.
to
We
go.
appreciate your help. I mean,
Absolutely.
Certainly do.
You've done great. Congratulations, Deputy.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Keep that grant money coming.
I'm trying. I'm actually working on one right now for radios, so we're doing our best.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your night. Take care. Jeff?
Yes. So one of the items that the committee had asked about previously, there were some questions on the proposed changes to veterans benefits. So regarding MGL Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 22H, if parents or legal guardians have their property in a trust, would they still receive a full exemption from the property taxes if their son or daughter died as a proximate cause of the military service? So when consulting with counsel on this, if the parents or legal guardian hold the record, a legal interest and sufficient beneficial interest in a trust on that property, then they would receive the exemption on the taxes, even if they had their own property in a trust.
Okay, so if it was a revocable trust, they wouldn't. Irrevocable, they wouldn't.
If it was a revocable trust?
They would. And if it's irrevocable, they lose their interest, so they wouldn't have it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The next question regarding MGL 59, Section 5, 22H, could parents of the guardians, quote, stack benefits, meaning be entitled to benefits from this section and benefits from other sections? There's actually a booklet that the Department of Revenue, maybe local services puts out, Mass Department of Revenue puts out on veterans benefits. So in consultation with that and also with counsel, and this is a quote from this section of the law, any person who receives an exemption pursuant to clause, and there's multiple clauses here, I won't reference all of them, shall not receive an exemption on the same property pursuant to any other provision of this section except for clause 18 or 40, the 45th clause. So 18 deals with any portion of an estate or person who may be, by reason of age, infirmity, or poverty, or financial hardship resulting from a change in active military status, not including initial enlistment, are in the judgment of the assessor unable to contribute fully towards their public charges. So in that circumstance, were someone to be in that condition, they could get an additional benefit, although I think it's noteworthy too that under this provision, the section of clause 22H, that's a full benefit, full exemption from the property taxes. So as a practical matter, in that circumstance, I can't imagine where, you know, if you're having your full taxes waived, there's nothing beyond that to allow for. And then the other piece here, this section 45, deals with solar panels. But again, if someone's getting their full taxes waived, there would not be any greater allowance there. Then the last question that was asked regarding MGL 59, Section 5, Clause G and H, do these benefits strictly apply to single-family homeowners if the property in question was an apartment building or included as an in-law apartment? Would those parties referenced in the clauses be eligible for benefits? In the case of, in the example that was cited in the booklet here, three-family house and the occupant occupies one unit, the exemption applies to the one unit.
Okay. Thank you.
So that was,
Were you able to look at the community block development grant information I had forwarded to you?
I did, and quite honestly, it was a couple of weeks ago, and I'm drawing a blank as to what I read, so I'm going to have to go back and look at it again. I did have a conversation today with Valerie Gingrich about the grant programs. The community development block grants are based upon, in part, eligibility, income eligibility. When we had the block grants before, it was focused on the Silver Lake area. There was a targeted area that was identified as income eligible. It's not clear whether we would still be eligible for grants through CDBG. The other thing that we need to be mindful of, though, is that it's one thing to apply for the grant and obtain the grant. It's another thing to staff it. We had at the time a full-time individual that went out and did the inspections on the properties that were rehabbed, and part-time assistant that, was responsible for documentation and so
For the
on.
rehab
so-
though, wouldn't that be the building inspector? To inspect the?
Well, the building inspector does his portion, but there's also requirements of the grant that have to be performed by the grant, I forget what his title was at the time, grant administrator or grant housing rehab specialist, I guess is what we call them. So, I mean, we will look at the possibility of, a grant person in the near future. I think one of the questions I guess I have and would want to get resolved is, in many cases, these grants are very specialized, and is hiring one person, are they going to have the expertise to apply for everything from a social services grant to a economic development
Actually,
grant?
you might want to take a look at the city of Beverly and their grant writer and what that person's done. I believe it's on their website, and this person has done some fantastic generation of grants over the past couple of years. Also, when we had the elderly service department in, and they said she knew of no grants for the senior center, it seems that a couple of towns over, they just got a $300,000 grant for a feasibility study for their senior center.
It was
Why?
Concord, I believe, yeah.
Why, I'm trying to figure out why our department heads aren't actively seeking grants in their individual domains.
Well, I would say that we have had grants. It's not like we're not doing anything on grants. The DPW has obtained grants for a recycling program and education there.
IT.
IT has obtained a grant recently for educational services on making us more mindful of ransomware and malware issues and so on. So there's, can we do a better job? Sure, I'm sure we can, but we are pursuing grants where we can.
But some of the ones that I'm seeing, they're fairly large, and some of the demographics match Wilmington's. So I think we should be a little bit more aggressive in going after the funds that are available to us.
To expand on John's point, I know the Beverly full-time grant writer, she makes $65,000 a year, and in 1 year brought in $13.5 million.
Is she the only staff person, or who else supports
Just
her?
her, she's just the
Mm.
full-time grant writer.
But I mean, there's gotta be people that are administering the grants. It's one thing to apply for grants, it's another thing to follow up and do all the work associated with executing the grant. She's executing the 13 million as well as
I
applying for
believe-
it?
Well, I believe it probably goes to each department would execute whatever they were allotted in that grant.
Okay,
She's one person in that one department.
okay.
Seems like there's an awful lot of money out there that we're just not bringing back home. And doing some of the research and looking at what these towns are getting for senior centers, for feasibility studies, for a lot of things that we're actually doing now. And I think that we need to take a very, very serious look at this, because if we don't, there's money sitting out there that we're just not even paying any attention to. Somebody else is getting it. So I know that information has been sent to you, with specific information.
Jeff, I'll get you the link for Beverly. I'll email that to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. And I'll send it to you, Kerry, as well, and you too, Brian.
Thank you.
Okay. So that way you can take a look at it and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Do you want to put this on the agenda for next week?
Yeah, actually, Chris, can you put this on the agenda for Thursday? Okay, because Thursday will be our last meeting together before the public hearing.
Right.
Because next week we're at Shawshene and at the public
Right.
schools. So Thursday will be our last get-together within the municipal budget for
Right.
this side. So I'll get that link over to you. You guys take a look at it, and if we can have your comments, Thursday evening, that'd be great.
Okay.
You know, we understand the demographic for every town and city is different, but there's definitely some grants out there for town of Wilmington.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. And we can look at that. I think there's, I would like to find out, about Beverly, for example. Is it one person that's, doing all this, and, who's, Beverly is a larger community. There's staff at some point, some level, there's staff that have to administer those grants, that have to complete all the paperwork, and not that that's not possible, but, I think we've got a pretty limited staffing group when you talk about in the town hall offices. There's not a lot of excess fat there. So the question is, do we have the bandwidth to do that on a scale like $13 million in Beverly or whatever? Maybe we do. I'm not saying we don't, but I want to get the rest of the story, I guess.
It's going to take an investment of 65 or 70,000 to bring that back into the town. That'd be a very good investment.
Right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It'd be a nice problem to have, how to administer $13 million worth of grants.
I think.
I think that'd be a great problem.
Yeah, no, I think just on the face value alone is that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
If that's the return on investment, I think there's a lot of other factors that go to it. As you had mentioned before, I think a lot of the senior center feasibility funding, I think that might have been from earmarks to the legislation. So that's, I think, one of the ways to tie in and work with your local legislators to some degree. Department heads to, I think, essentially be tied into some of the potential grant opportunities. It's through, in some capacity, networking or their own, I guess, essentially association, whether it's the Accountants Association, HR, or other various different departments. Is that a lot of ways that you hear about those opportunities might be through your annual meetings?
We're funding them to go to the conferences.
Yes.
And that's a great networking place, so they should be able to come back
Yeah,
to
and
the
I
town.
think that's where some degree, some
Yeah.
of them come from. From
Yeah.
my position, I talk to, the DOR in a limited capacity does essentially oversee some state grant funding that does pale in comparison to a lot of the federal grants that are out there.
It seems like a very specialized talent
Yeah.
to understand how to write a grant. And that sums up everything I know about grants. And I think that's probably true of most people.
It does,
So I don't think that our expectation is that department heads should necessarily be held responsible for, it'd be great if they were able to do it like Chief Kavanaugh seems to have a real talent for and has been already extremely successful with it. I think that when we're looking at this research and seeing that towns who have a grant writer are bringing in a lot of money. Towns who don't have grant writers may get lucky every now and then, but you're relying on somebody that, a department head that is already being pulled in 100 different directions. And this may not be something that's attractive to them, to sit down and figure out how to,
Yeah,
chase a grant
Yeah.
and do it successfully.
But if they know about the grant, and we had a grant writer to actually do the physical grant writing,
Right.
it'd make it easier.
Yeah, no, the awareness is
Yeah.
one big thing.
That-
There's a couple different
yeah.
flavors, I think, of specialization, essentially, if
Yeah.
you want to look at community development. Public safety is its own essential bubble for some of the grants.
Yeah.
And it is worthwhile if you are going to be exploring multiple grants, is to at least have discussions internally before they're accepted too, because a lot of times there are other consequences as far as taking on full-time employment as well that might be tied in for 1 year grant funding. And there's other decisions that have to be made at that point, but it's certainly well worth the discussion.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the information on,
I'll get that over in the morning, and you guys can take a look at it, and we
Okay.
can, continue the discussion Thursday night and see how that
Okay.
goes.
By all means, search out the other communities that have grant writers.
Yeah,
There's
I
quite a
know it's,
few of them that have grant writers.
Framingham, I saw a posting on the MMA website, Framingham is looking for a grant writer, so I know that there are communities out there, that are doing that. Okay.
Carrie, anything for us, or?
Not tonight, unless you have a question for me.
I don't, anyone else? Anything else from you guys, no?
We have minutes?
And we have minutes to approve. And that is, entertain a motion for Tuesday, February 11th.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Do we have anything else? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes, we're out of here. Thank you.